Each of us has two lives. The first begins when we are born, and the second when we stop being afraid. I've seen people who had talent, opportunities, connections, but lost everything because of fear. And I've seen others who had only faith and determination and rose higher than they ever dreamed. That's why today I want to talk to you about how to bravely overcome your fears. About 3 simple steps that helped me go from doubt to confidence. Stay until the end, because there will be a small exercise that could become your new beginning. Fear is a strange thing. It has no body, no face, yet it can stop the strongest person in the world. It can make us give up a dream, an opportunity, a calling. And what's interesting, it often appears right when we're one step away from something great. I used to think fear was a sign of danger. Now I know it's a sign of possibility. When I was young, I was afraid of everything. Afraid of becoming even poorer than I already was. Afraid of losing a job I hated anyway. Afraid of making a mistake because I already had a whole collection of them. At 25, I stood in front of the mirror and saw a man who had achieved nothing. And you know what paralyzed me the most? Not poverty, not failure, but the fear that I would stay that way. I remember the day my friend invited me to a seminar by a man I had never heard of, Earl Schoaf. I had no money, even the ticket seemed like a luxury, and yet something inside me said, go. But I was afraid, not that I wouldn't understand the lecture, but that I would understand it too well, because then I'd have to change something, and change is scary, but I went, and what I heard that evening became a turning point in my life. Earl said, if you want things to change, you have to change. A simple sentence, but it shattered my fear in half, because suddenly I realized I'm not a victim, I'm the cause, and until I change, nothing around me will change. I remember that moment every time I talk about fear, because fear doesn't come to stop us. It comes to ask, do you really want this? And every time you answer with action, fear steps back. I've watched people for decades, in business, in sales, in life. And you know what I've seen? The most successful ones aren't those who feel no fear. They're the ones who are afraid but do it anyway. People often say, I can't because I'm scared. But the truth is, you can't until you do it. Because action is the only door out of the room of fear. We're all born with 2 fears, the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. The rest are learned, and what is learned can be unlearned. The fear of crowds, the fear of losing your job, the fear of looking foolish, the fear of taking the first step. All of that isn't innate. It's a program someone once installed in your mind, and it's time to hit delete. But here's the paradox. We can't destroy fear without looking it in the face. We can't defeat it by turning away. Fear is like a shadow. The more you run from it, the bigger it gets. But the moment you turn around and take a step toward it, it disappears. I had to learn that the hard way. After I lost my first business, I was afraid to start again. All I wanted was to hide. But then I did what any farmer from my native Idaho would do. I went out into the field of my life, even with empty hands. I realized either I let fear control my day, or I start controlling myself. And from that moment, I learned the main principle. You don't have to wait until you're not afraid. Start while you're scared. Many people think courage is when you have no fear, but real courage is when you're afraid and go forward anyway. Maybe your knees are shaking, your hands are cold, your voice trembles, it doesn't matter, because that's the very moment when fear turns into fuel. Let's look at it more broadly. Fear isn't the enemy, it's a compass. If you're afraid, it means you're standing at the door of your growth. The one who fears nothing is either dead or desires nothing. Fear is proof that you're alive, that you still have a dream. When I started speaking on stage, every appearance was a test. Hundreds of people sat before me, each with their own opinion. It felt like everyone was waiting for me to make a mistake. But one evening I said to myself, Jim, this isn't stage fright. This is growth fear. And I decided, if fear is part of growth, I'll invite it into every one of my days. Now I tell my audiences the same thing I once told myself. Don't try to avoid fear. Learn to live with it like a companion. Because fear shows you're moving in the right direction. If you're not afraid, you might just be standing still. There's another interesting thing. When we avoid fear, we start avoiding life. We stop taking risks. Stop saying what we really think. Stop dreaming out loud. We build ourselves a comfortable cage and call it stability. But comfort doesn't grow a person. The comfort zone is where dreams die from lack of air. I know this because I lived there once, and every time I thought I was safe, I lost a part of myself. And on the contrary, every time I did something that made me tremble, I became bigger. And here's what's interesting. Every great result in my life was once something I was most afraid of. So I want you to remember one simple truth. Fear is not a signal to run. It's an invitation to grow. If you're scared right now, maybe that's exactly your opportunity. And today we'll go through 3 specific ways, not just to defeat fear, but to turn it into an ally. Because after all, fear isn't darkness. It's simply a sign that light lies ahead. The first method that gave me back power over myself sounds simple. Throw out the phantom possibilities from your head. I used to wake up with them and fall asleep beside them. My mind was like an old radio tuned to one single station, Anxiety FM. And anxiety knows how to tell long stories. What if the economy crashes? What if clients leave? What if you embarrass yourself? What if someone says no? Those what ifs are endless. And worse, most of them are beyond our control. That's why they're phantoms. They consume time and willpower, but build nothing. I remember the day my mentor asked me, "Jim, what can you influence today?" I started talking about the market, my boss, the circumstances. He smiled. No. What can you influence? And suddenly I felt ashamed because my whole day was leased out to rumors, forecasts, and other people's opinions. I had stopped being the farmer of my own land and become a frightened tourist staring at the storm through a window. I realized something simple. As long as I feed my mind with other people's ghosts, my own seeds won't grow. He taught me to post a guard at the door of my mind. That's not cruelty, it's hygiene. Just as we don't let anyone into our house, we shouldn't let any thought into our head. What did I do practically? Every morning I asked myself, what thought am I signing in my inner contract right now? If I sign today, everything will fall apart. My day obediently follows that command. If I sign today, I'll work 2 focused hours on my most important task. The day obeys that too. Peace begins with the choice of which station you tune into. But there's a trap here. Phantom possibilities are sneaky. They disguise themselves as preparation. You think you're assessing risks, you think you're planning, but in reality, you're just spinning in circles. I overcame this by separating the thoughts that create from the thoughts that consume. The first push you to act, the second pull you away from it. If after 10 minutes of thinking I don't have a small step to take right now, it means I'm feeding ghosts. In such moments I tell myself, Jim, back to the field. The mind is a tractor, not a movie theater. And I get to work. When I was 25, I kept repeating, that's all the company pays. And the more I repeated it, the poorer I became. Until one day I heard, that's all the company pays you. That's what phantom possibilities do. They remove responsibility from us and skillfully turn it into a story about circumstances. That day I stopped chewing stories and started chewing facts. What skills can I improve? Who can I meet? How many calls can I make? How many pages can I read? I replaced what if with how many, and the fear shrank. Let me give you an image. Imagine your mind as a garden. If every morning ghosts come, they sow the weeds of what if, what about, what when. Weeds grow faster than flowers. I decided to weed the garden with discipline. What does that mean in practice? When a new terrible scenario appears in my head, I ask, can I take a step today that reduces the risk? If yes, I do it. If not, I file it under out of my control and return to what's in my hands. I don't argue with the weeds, I simply tend my rows every day. Have you noticed how news, gossip, and other people's fears shape your mood, and your mood shapes your decisions, and your decisions shape your destiny? It's a delicate chain. Break it at the start. I learned to dose information like medicine, precise amounts at the right time with a clear purpose. The rest is noise. I'm not against knowing what's happening in the world. I'm against living a life I don't have and dying from fears that will never happen. When I began speaking publicly, the first audiences scared me to the point of trembling. Dozens of snakes uncoiled in my head. You'll forget your words. Who cares? They'll compare you to the better ones. And here's what I did. Instead of phantom possibilities, I made my mind count the real ones. How many hours of practice did I do yesterday? How many examples did I prepare? How many times did I rehearse the opening? Suddenly it turned out that fear loves emptiness. Fill it with preparation and it becomes smaller. And it's important to say, this isn't about naive optimism. It's about strict focus. I don't close my eyes to risks. I close the door to fantasies that paralyze me. When we throw out phantom possibilities, we make room for real ones. We begin to see what truly needs our attention, the skill we need to improve, the person we need to talk to, the step we've been postponing for too long. There's one small habit that helped me every day. I opened my journal and asked 3 questions. What's beyond my control today? What's within my control? What's the smallest step I'll take before noon? And I did that first. When the day begins with action, fear loses its voice. When the day begins with a ghost, fear calls a meeting and doesn't leave until evening. And you know what's the best part? When you stop feeding the ghosts, life rewards you. You start noticing people you hadn't seen before, opportunities that were already nearby, ideas that needed a bit of quiet. You feel dignity returning, because nothing humiliates a person more than their own fantasies about a terrible tomorrow. And nothing uplifts more than a small action today. Of course, our mind doesn't give up without a fight. From time to time, it tries to switch back to the old station. In such moments, I quietly tell myself, Jim, we've been in this room before. There's no furniture here. I smile, close the door, and get back to work. And each return like that is training for the muscle of willpower. Eventually, you notice that the anxiety station crackles more quietly, while the action station sounds clearer. But that's not all. We've cleared the weeds, but next comes the planting of new trees. In the next section, we'll take a step I once ran from, meeting our fear before we begin. This isn't about self-torture. It's about the wisdom of a farmer who looks at the sky before sowing. And at the end of the video, I'll give you a simple practice you can do tonight to place your inner guard at the door of your mind. Then, when a ghost knocks next time, you'll already know how to answer. The second method begins where most people stop. Meet your fear before you start. Not after failure, not after victory, but before the first step. Why is this important? Because in the pre-action phase, fear is the loudest. Imagination paints monsters bigger than reality. If you can look them in the eye even before the start, the real path turns out shorter and smoother than it seemed from afar. I learned this from my own experience when I first decided to step onto a big stage. People told me, just start and you'll figure it out somehow. But I knew something else. You must begin with an honest conversation with yourself. It's like a business deal with inner resistance. You come with a flashlight, open every closet, look into the storage rooms, no romance, only clarity. I sat down with a blank sheet and wrote out everything that scared me, forgetting a thought, botching a joke, facing an indifferent audience, not reaching the level of those I admire. I didn't sugarcoat it, and I wasn't ashamed. I wrote out the worst-case scenarios as if fear's attorney demanded a complete list of charges. When the list grew long, I did what a farmer from Idaho would do. Next to it, I wrote an action answer to each point. Forget a thought? Fine. Make reminder markers. Indifferent audience? Fine. Insert segments that win back attention. Ask directly those sitting in the third row. Botch a joke? Fine. Don't rely on the joke. Rely on the substance. And here's what happened next. With each concrete answer, fear lost its size. It was no longer a fog, it became a task. And a task can be done. Over the years, I realized fear has a favorite weapon: uncertainty. When you don't name what you fear, fear names it for you and always exaggerates. So I created a simple ritual that became the first rung of any start. I quietly asked myself, what am I really afraid of? Not in general, not vaguely, but specifically, businesslike. The answers sometimes stung in my chest. I was afraid of looking ridiculous. I was afraid that those close to me wouldn't understand my ambition. I was afraid of losing again what I had already won. These are honest answers, and they're necessary. Because being dishonest with yourself is like a crooked mirror. You head out on a road that doesn't lead where you intend. I learned to respect my fear, not to worship it, but to respect it, to hear it out, to find out what it's protecting, and then to take the wheel back. There's an inner turn here, and I want you to remember it. We often ask, what's the worst that can happen? Good question. But no less important is another. What's the worst that will happen if I don't try? Because fear orders us to count the risks of action, while discipline forces us to count the risks of inaction. When I first turned down a big opportunity because of doubts, I felt relief for a few days and heaviness for a few years. Relief is fleeting, heaviness is stubborn. That's when a rule appeared in my vocabulary. If the price of inaction is higher than the price of a mistake, I act. That's how I saved myself more than once from the quiet, cultured, respectable failure called nothing changed. Let's talk about a technique that has worked many times for me and my students. Mental rehearsal. Not imagining a perfect day, imagining a hard one. Right now, close your eyes and see your plan encountering obstacles. The phone stays silent, a partner is late, the first attempt fails. What do you do in response? Not what you feel, but what you do. I've seen this simple exercise remove half of people's anxiety. Why? Because anxiety loves surprises, and discipline loves scenarios. When you've already run a hard day in your head and you know your maneuver, you lose the need to panic. Instead, a restrained readiness appears. That is another name for courage. I often told the story of an acquaintance who lost everything and survived. When she got back on her feet, one habit saved her from paralysis by fear of repetition. Before every tough decision, she honestly played out in her imagination the worst case and her response to it. Do you know what that led to? She stopped viewing risk as a black hole and began treating it like a border that can be crossed with the right documents. The documents are your skills, your preparation, your plan B, and your readiness to act quickly when plan A fails. And yes, sometimes the border still won't let you through. But then, it's not the end. It's a different point of entry. I'll pause briefly here and address you directly. What are you afraid of today? Not in general today. Which call are you avoiding? What truth are you hiding from yourself? What's written on the first line of that list you don't want to make? Take a pen. Write 3 statements. I'm afraid of. This fear protects. My action despite fear today is. Without postponing until evening, fill in the blanks. This isn't magic, it's a contract. You're making it with your stronger self, not with your loud fear. I remember my first meetings with top executives. I'd enter the office and fear arrived earlier and sat in the chair opposite. It whispered, "You're not ready. They'll see it now." And I learned to respond not with words, but with behavior. I arrived 10 minutes early. I put a short conversation plan on the table. I asked the first question. I wasn't ashamed to say, "I don't know. I'll verify by Friday." And after each meeting, fear seemed smaller. Here's the thing. Fear always tries to put you in the passenger seat. But if you show up to your own conversation with your own plan, you take back the driver's role. Work harder on yourself than on your job is a phrase that turned my youth around. And in the topic of fear, it means this. Prepare yourself to meet it. Don't pretend you're not afraid. Act so that fear can't take away your honor of action. The honor of action is when you don't make excuses to yourself or to others if something goes wrong. You show up and try again. You refine the method. You don't confuse your worth with your result. The result is today's grade. Worth is the course you keep despite the waves. Let me offer an image from farm life. Before planting, we look at the sky and into the soil. If hail is coming, that's not a reason not to sow. That's a reason to prepare shelter for the seedlings. Likewise in work, if criticism lies ahead, that's not a reason to stay silent. That's a reason to shape your thought clearly, verify your data, train your voice. If a supply failure is possible, that's not a reason not to take the order. That's a reason to plan alternate routes. Fear is useful if you let it work for the quality of your preparation, not for the paralysis of your will. And I'll speak honestly about another trap. Sometimes meeting fear, we begin to dramatize our own story. Mine is the hardest. No one will understand. It's too late. Do you see what that is? It's an attempt to turn your fear into a privilege, an untouchable status. Don't make it a badge on your lapel. Take away its right to define your biography. You have other tools. Discipline, honesty, curiosity. Use them. Simply tell yourself, yes, I'm scared, but I'm not unique. I'm just a person who will do their work today. And here's the best part. When you start meeting fear before the start, a calm courage is born. It doesn't shout. It doesn't post selfies with the caption, "No fear." It quietly does its work day after day. And that is what changes the trajectory. You no longer rush after others' approval or run from others' judgment. You're guided by an inner contract. I will show up, see, call myself by my own name, and take the first step, then the second, then the third. This is the course that leads us out of chaos. But that's not all. We've learned to dispel the fog and to meet the "what exactly am I afraid of?" Ahead lies the third method, which creates the most powerful inner lever, to imagine the alternative and feel its price. I'll show you how to weigh two scenes properly, when you submit to fear and when you act despite it, so that the choice is no longer a mystery. And in the practical part at the end, we'll bring everything together into a simple but very effective evening review procedure that gives you both a shield and a compass at once. The third method I call the simple but ruthless mirror. Imagine the alternative, not one, but two scenes of the same life. In the first, you obey fear. In the second, you act despite it. I ask you not just to think, but to feel. Let these two films pass through you like through a living person, not a spectator in the back row. Because in truth, it's not logic that decides. It's the price the heart feels. When I was first invited to speak before a large audience of salespeople, I could have chosen the first scene. It sounded sweet. Decline politely, keep your reputation, keep your peace. I even came up with a couple of decent excuses, but I deliberately played that film to the end. What next? Another polite no next time, then another. My name appears less and less in organizers' notebooks. I start speaking less and doubting more. In the mirror at night, it's still Jim, but the eyes are different. They remember every "I'll do it later." And here's what I saw in the credits of that film. I saved a few hours of anxiety, but paid with years of unrealized potential. The price felt too high, even for a cautious man from Idaho. Then I switched to the second scene. I accept the invitation, and fear comes with me like an old acquaintance. My voice trembles in the first minute. Two people in the audience turn to their phones. I miss a joke. But I breathe, return to the content, find the eyes of a man in the fourth row who's nodding, and I speak to him, and then to everyone. At the end, it's not a stadium ovation, no. A few hands, a few questions, one short line of people wanting to say thank you. I go home exhausted, but different. This film has a price too. Nerves, sweat, discomfort. But the ending is different. I grew. And from that evening on, they started inviting me more often. Not because I became a genius overnight, but because I chose not the easy film, but the useful one. Every day, we all stand between these two stories. Fear convinces us to pay small coins of relief right now, and then sends us the bill for big dreams tomorrow. Discipline, on the contrary, takes payment up front, in minutes of uncertainty, in miles of practice, but pays dividends in the form of self-respect. We always pay. The only question is, for what? For this method to work, you need honesty and imagination you can trust. Here's what I do. Before a decision, I quiet the noise and write 2 short scripts. If I give in to fear, what do I get in a month, in a year, in 5? If I act despite fear, what do I get on those same horizons? I don't glamorize the second scene or demonize the first. I just let them pass through me like 2 different winds. And then I ask myself, who am I after each one? Not how much I earned or whom I impressed, but who I became. The answer is always clear. Because deep down we know which scene makes us and which erases us. One of my acquaintances once turned down a major project because he feared he couldn't handle the scale. He sighed with relief, and a year later he came to me a different man, spoke quieter, dreamed more cautiously. I didn't reproach him. We simply rewound both films. And he saw himself in the second one, how he would have failed a few steps, but fixed them, how he would have studied at night what once scared him, how a year later he would speak confidently because he had experience, not fear. And he made his choice, not a heroic, showy one, a practical one. He reclaimed his right to the second scene, and life, as always, sided with action. When you imagine the alternative, do one more important thing. Feel not only the result, but the daily flavor of each scene. In the first, many excuses, small compromises, many tomorrows. In the second, many inconveniences, but energy, movement, pride in small victories. These are different diets for the soul. From the first, you feel full and sleepy. From the second, sometimes hungry but alive. You might say, Jim, what if I try and lose? I'll answer the way I answered myself many years ago. Losing in the second scene is a lesson that becomes capital. Winning in the first is a habit that becomes a corner cell with fewer and fewer windows. A mistake made in motion can be corrected. A mistake made in avoidance becomes a lifestyle. And one more thing. When imagining alternatives, don't stop at yourself. See those your choice will touch. When I hit the brakes because of fear, I deprived not only myself of the stage of growth, I deprived that man in the fourth row who needed my words that night. Our decisions are rarely private. Fear always whispers about you. Responsibility always speaks about us. You might object, easy to say when you already have confidence, but confidence is the result. It comes after choosing the second scene, after dozens of small steps, after you've lived through a few cold evenings and still went out into the field. It doesn't come to help you make the first step. It comes when you're already walking. That's why I ask you, don't wait for the feeling. Wait for yourself in action. But that's not all. We've lifted the curtain from the future and seen the price of fear and the price of courage. Next, I'll combine all three methods into one daily mechanism you can start tonight. We'll turn your imagination into a compass, your preparation into a shield, and your first step into a habit that doesn't ask permission from your mood. And yes, at the end, I'll give you a practice you can do without fanfare or big promises. Simple as farm work, but just as reliable. Because life loves those who don't just watch movies, but rewrite the script with their own hands. You know, I could talk for hours about how fear hides opportunities, but the real discovery never happens on stage. It happens inside you. So let's take a short pause to look at ourselves from the side. All these three methods, they're not just ideas, they're mirrors. And now I invite you to look into them closely. You don't need to pause the video, just listen and answer in your mind, honestly, without embellishment. Remember, rate yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 means never or not my case at all, and 10 means yes, that's completely me. Don't look for a perfect number, look for the truth. First question, how often do you delay action because you're waiting for fear to disappear on its own? Think about it. Maybe it's not fear, just lack of decision. Imagine you're standing before a door behind which lies your opportunity. 1, you don't even touch the handle. 10, you open the door even if it's dark inside. Second question, how clearly do you even understand what exactly you're afraid of? Many people say, I'm scared, but can't name what of. And without a name, fear is immortal. If your fears have names, you're already holding them by the collar. Third question. When you imagine the worst-case scenario, do you see yourself strong or as a victim? It's not a trifle. Your imagination recreates you a second time. If in your imagination you're weak, fear wins before the game even begins. Rate how often you allow yourself to be the hero even in difficult pictures of life. Fourth question. How often do you feel that fear controls your voice? The words you didn't say, the offers you didn't make, the honesty you held back? Think about the past week. Whose decisions did you carry out? Yours or fear's? Remember, silence dictated by fear has a cost, and that cost is always higher than it seems. Fifth question. And the most important one, how strongly do you want what fear is holding back right now? Because sometimes the problem isn't fear, it's weak desire. A strong dream outweighs any fear, the way a stone outweighs a feather. If you rate your desire below 6, maybe it's simply not your path. But if it's 8, 9, or 10, then fear is just the guard at the door you must walk through. Take a pause and recall these numbers. They're not meant to shame you. They're like marks on a map. They show where you stand right now. When you finish watching, return to them with paper and a pen. Write down the numbers and a short phrase beside each. What can I do to raise this number by 1 point? 1, not 10. Because progress doesn't require leaps, it requires steps. And one more piece of advice from me personally, don't try to banish fear. That's like trying to chase away a shadow. Instead, put light in front of it. Every small action is a match you strike in the dark. And suddenly you notice the room is bigger than it seemed, and the monster is smaller. Remember, fear doesn't disappear when you avoid it. It disappears when you begin to act despite it. And even if the first action is small, it's real. And the real is always stronger than the imagined. So when you finish this video, don't turn it off in your mind. Just do something small, something you've been putting off for a while. Make the call, write the message, start the page, take the step. It's not just an action, it's your declaration of return. I've learned one simple truth. Fear doesn't disappear with time. It disappears with movement. Time heals nothing if you don't change direction yourself. Every day you choose to act, fear loses a piece of territory in your life. And one day you'll look back and realize everything most valuable you have today was born from something you once feared. Think about it. Everything you love now was once unfamiliar. Everything you're proud of once began with trembling hands. And every victory you've ever celebrated once stood behind a door labeled scary. Fear is not a wall, it's a test. And if you pass it, life opens the next floor. My mentor used to say, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. And today I want to pass that phrase to you. Don't ask for fear to disappear. Ask to become the person who can walk through it. Because right there, beyond the line of fear, lies the life you were born for. So the next time you feel that trembling inside, don't run, smile. Say to yourself, here it is, my chance, my invitation to grow, and take your step. Not a big one, not a perfect one, just your own. Because in the end, courage isn't a loud declaration, nor a public feat. Courage is when you're alone with yourself and still move forward. And then one day you'll wake up, look back, and realize the greatest thing I ever overcame wasn't fear. It was the version of me that once believed in it. And that will be your most precious victory.